Greetings everyone and welcome to Spacing Out. I'm Jason McClellan.
And I'm Maureen Ellsbury. Thanks for joining us.
We were sad to hear about the passing of Roswell witness Jesse Marcel Jr. a couple weeks ago. We'll talk more about that soon. But first, let's talk about some of the other stories that made headlines recently.
A new study contributes to the theory that Earth life began on Mars and was transported here by meteorites.
On Wednesday, August 28th, biochemist Steve Benner of Florida's Westheimer Institute for Science and Technology presented evidence at the annual Goldschmidt Geochemistry Conference in Florence, Italy, suggesting life's Martian origins. Scientific American concisely explains, the new argument in a nutshell is that young Mars had a more oxygen-rich atmosphere than Earth did 4 billion years ago and was drier. This would have resulted in a different mineralogical surface environment, one that could have provided a catalyst for the assembly of key RNA molecules and all the biotic chemistry leading to life as we know it. Subsequent asteroid impacts on Mars would have spewed chunks of rock into space, carrying life, presumably in microbial form, through the solar system and onto the surface of a youthful Earth.
Benner's recent research found that an oxidized form of the element molybdenum was likely on Mars' surface at one point in history, but not on Earth. Space.com reports that molybdenum may have been crucial to the origin of life. Benner explains, it's only when molybdenum becomes highly oxidized that it is able to influence how early life formed. This form of molybdenum couldn't have been available on Earth at the time life first began because 3 billion years ago, the surface of Earth had very little oxygen, but Mars did. It's yet another piece of evidence which makes it more likely life came to Earth on a Martian meteorite rather than starting on this planet.
The idea that life from elsewhere could have been transported to Earth, a theory known as panspermia, is not new. But as Scientific American points out, the theories surrounding the initial steps in the creation of life are heavily debated. And Benner's theories rely heavily on assumptions and educated guesses regarding the environments on ancient Earth and Mars. Scientific American concludes, so did Mars seed life on Earth? We simply don't know. However, by exploring the possibility, we certainly stand to gain information from the fact that young Earth and young Mars probably were rather different, chemically and environmentally. 2 natural test tubes rather than 1. At the end of May, a security guard at a technopark in the town of Gebze in the Kocaeli province of Turkey says he saw a UFO and was able to capture it on a camera with his cell phone before it disappeared.
The security guard says he heard dogs barking, so he decided to go out and see what was disturbing them. When he got outside, he saw an object resembling a flying saucer in the sky. He quickly took a photo with his cell phone, but when he went to take another photo, the UFO was gone.
Turkish newspaper Haberturk reports that a representative from the Sirius UFO Space Sciences Research Center in Turkey says they have taken an interest in the photograph and intend to research it further.
Witnesses in Phoenix, Arizona and surrounding areas observed a bright UFO on the evening of Monday, September 2nd.
AZCentral.com reports that 3TV received dozens of calls about the UFO over Phoenix, and at least 3 witnesses filed sighting reports with the Mutual UFO Network, or MUFON. One witness describes, the light was so bright it looked like I was looking at the light from a welding torch. It first looked like the planet Venus, then it got brighter and bigger. I noticed it started to move along a path. It then hovered for about 5 minutes, then it started to turn orange, then in a minute it turned bright red. Then it turned back to the original bright white light and started to ascend up so high that it finally looked like a very distant star. It vanished right after.
Another witness reported seeing 3 bright motionless lights in the sky. The witness describes, estimated time stationary was 5 to 7 minutes. The object hovered, then slowly just dissipated, but did not move. From what I could see, the lights made a triangle pattern, and vaguely you could see what looked to be some sort of wings coming from the side of the object.
A similar report filed with MUFON describes, just before sundown, I saw a relatively large light in the north sky, too big for a star, 5 times the size of a star. I got my binoculars and saw it was made up of 3 balls, 1 on the bottom and 2 on top, with a small space between the top 2 spheres. It didn't move for 15 minutes. Then it started backing off and turning gold to yellow. Then it got smaller and smaller until it was gone.
According to AZCentral.com, the North American Aerospace Defense Command said no surveillance balloons were being tracked in the area. Further, the United States Strategic Air Command could not determine the source of the balloon. The National Weather Service received several calls about the UFO. A spokesperson confirmed the object was not a National Weather Service balloon, but this spokesperson suggested the possibility that the UFO was a high-altitude balloon from the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico.
After investigating the mystery, azcentral.com concluded that the object was a research balloon from NASA's Columbia Scientific Balloon Facility in Texas, which is managed by the New Mexico State University. azcentral.com explains that the 2-ton teardrop-shaped balloon was launched from Fort Sumner in New Mexico at 9 a.m. on Monday, September 2nd. The balloon had a volume of 11.2 million cubic feet and was more than 300 feet across at its largest point. This massive balloon reached a height of 120,000 feet above sea level, and it eventually landed west of Phoenix early Tuesday morning. The balloon's payload included student-designed instruments that were being tested at high altitudes. More flights will reportedly take place in the near future.
Scientists are one step closer to confirming the super heavy element 115.
A Swedish team of scientists recently conducted experiments on element 115 at the GSI Helmholtz Center for Heavy Ion Research in Germany. An element's atomic number, 115 in this case, represents the number of protons an element contains. For this study, Life Science explains that researchers shot a super fast beam of calcium, which has 20 protons, at a thin film of americium, the element with 95 protons. When these atomic nuclei collided, some fused together to create short-lived atoms with 115 protons.
This new research was led by Dirk Rudolph, a professor at the Division of Atomic Physics at Lund University. He explains that although scientists from the Glenn T. Seaborg Institute and the Chemical Biology and Nuclear Science Division at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory announced the discovery of element 115 in 2004, it is yet to be officially acknowledged because independent confirmation is required to measure the exact proton number. Rudolph and his team assert their recent experiments did just that.
The next step, as the BBC explains, is for the potential new element to be reviewed by a committee which consists of members of the International Unions of Pure and Applied Physics and Chemistry. They will decide whether to recommend further experiments before the discovery of the new element is acknowledged. Life Science explains that element 115 has yet to be officially named, but it is temporarily called unpentium, roughly based on the Latin and Greek words for the digits in its atomic number, 115. The new research will be published in the Physical Review Letters.
Element 115 received attention in 1989 when Area 51 whistleblower Bob Lazar asserted that extraterrestrial spacecraft at Area 51's S4 facility were powered by the element. KLAS TV investigative reporter George Knapp published a story following the discovery of element 115 in 2004. In the article, Knapp spoke with Lazar about the 2004 discovery, something Knapp referred to as a profound development.
But he pointed out that the material decayed almost instantly. Then Knapp reported, Lazar says the first batch was only a starting point and that he will be proven right in the long run. Lazar explained, I'd like to see them continue to work and produce different isotopes of 115 because they're going to come up with a handful of different varieties and they're going to come up with a stable isotope, and that's what we're interested in. But based on the new experiment, that hasn't happened just yet. The element still only lasts for less than a second.
Open Mind spoke with Bob Lazar's friend John Lear, who explained how element 115 is supposedly utilized as a fuel for extraterrestrial spacecraft.
What happens is this, I think, weighs 238 grams. Slips in there, cap goes on, and then this little thing pumps protons into there and bumps 115 up to 116. Now 115 is stable and 116 is not stable. So when it plugs in one proton, 116 being unstable transmutes to 115, and it emits two things. Number one, anti-gravity, and it allows you to capture the gravity A wave, because the gravity A wave just extends just a little beyond the perimeter that they can actually capture it. And what they do with the gravity A wave is amplify it and aim it somewhere in space, and these gravity amplifiers pull space. Now, we think of space as just a each square meter one hydrogen atom per square meter, but actually it's a fabric. You can pull it and push it, and what they do is they pull space, wrap it around the craft, and they turn it off, and they're instantly a million miles away.
It's interesting to see element 115 coming in the news this summer, because as we've seen now with this, it seems to be the summer of Lazar.
Yeah.
Everything's all about Bob Lazar, the Area 51 reveal, and now element 115. Everything's coming up Lazar.
I know, it's very strange. And what makes this really interesting, too, is you look back on Knapp's article from 2004 on this, and Lazar stated, you know, people think I'm a liar now, but I'm going to prove them right in the long run.
Right.
And what's interesting is everyone thought, well, since it decays so instantly, that there is no way he could be right. But he said, well, you know, you haven't discovered that form yet. This form that the government had prior from reverse engineering extraterrestrial spacecraft had to come from somewhere natural, like a supernova, which would be from another galaxy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So with the Area 51 stuff and the Element 115 stuff, a lot of people are now saying, oh, well, maybe Bob Lazar is onto something. Maybe we should listen to what he had to say. But, you know, it's important to point out Bob Lazar didn't invent the idea of Element 115. Right. You know, it was theorized about in the 60s and possibly
70s,
earlier.
Yeah,
so, yes, it might lend credence to some of what he said, but we'll see. It's interesting. Lazar's been so much in the news this summer, but another thing that seems to be, we've talked about a lot this summer, has been weather balloons, research balloons coming up in UFO sightings. And we had the weird thing with Project Loon, Google's Project Loon, claiming sightings for responsibility for the sighting that Alan Epling had. And now we've got this other research balloon, and I know a lot of people here in Phoenix were going crazy with this thing, and based on some of the descriptions, talking about 3 lights, 3 balls in the sky, changing color, doesn't necessarily match up with the research balloon, but as we pointed out, things at high altitude can certainly look bizarre.
Yeah, indeed, and also, what was the time of day this occurred at? I didn't quite catch that.
So it was, I think it was just after the sun had gone down. So it was still light in the sky. You could definitely see this bright ball in the sky.
Right. I was just trying to determine whether that might account for some of the color changes.
Right. There was definitely still sun having an effect on this.
Well,
thing.
I had a lot of friends contact me Tuesday morning when we were back in the office. Did you see that? What was it? Did you see it?
Right.
And you know, honestly, I was in a dark cave all day Monday relaxing and not paying attention to the news, so I missed it. But by the time I knew about it, it had already been identified.
Right. I had people contact me, too, right after it had disappeared. They said, please tell me you saw that. And I was like, no, I didn't. But something that I want to point out is interesting about this story is that although AZ Central talked to all these different authorities, you know, the National Weather Service and other people were responsible, or, you know, they didn't contact the FAA, I don't think, but they contacted some other group who monitors things in the sky, and they were unable to determine what it was. And that just shows you how little we really know about what's in our skies when these people who are responsible for that can identify, you know, a research balloon that was planned and launched, and there was tracking software available with that. You could go to a website and track where this balloon was going.
And the fact that it did happen to touch down just west of Phoenix. So this one we're going to stick with weather balloon on, but I guarantee there may be some variations with, but that's not what I saw. But
right, absolutely. That doesn't mean that was the only thing in the sky that night.
Well, this is interesting because I'm sure we're going to hear other reports of that isn't what I saw. I actually saw this, that maybe possible government cover-up with this weather balloon.
Yeah, and it's always possible that there were multiple objects in the sky that night.
Very true. Well, the UFO community was saddened by the death of Jesse Marcel Jr. on August 24th. Alejandro Rojas has more about the passing of this witness to the events of the 1947 Roswell UFO incident.
Jesse Marcel Jr. was the son of Jesse Marcel Sr., who was the first Air Force officer on the scene at the debris site of the famous Roswell crash in 1947. Sr. was the intelligence officer at the Roswell Army Airfield and tasked with visiting the ranch where the crash reportedly took place to assess the situation. He was the first to determine that the material that was found was unusual and that what they had was a crashed flying saucer. Marcel Sr. took some of the material back to the base, but on the way stopped off to show it to his son and wife. Marcel Jr. recalled the material as being very odd. There were metal rods with strange writing and an aluminum foil type of material that was indestructible. Of course, the Air Force denied the crash was unusual, claiming it to be a weather balloon, a story that Marcel Sr. went along with until 1978, when he was interviewed by UFO researcher Stanton Friedman. At that time, Marcel Sr. admitted that the material that the Air Force had him pose with for the press was a weather balloon, but not the material he had found in the fields. Like his father, Marcel Jr. spent most of his life in the military, much of it as a flight surgeon. In fact, during a stint with the Montana National Guard, Marcel served as a state surgeon for the state of Montana. Marcel Jr. served a tour in Iraq as recent as 2004 at the age of 68. He always maintained that he and his father believed the material that they had examined back in 1947 was unearthly. After his father's death in 1986, Marcel Jr. became the focus for the media and the skeptics when it came to Roswell, a task that he did not shy away from. He says his colleagues in the military never made fun of him for it, but were genuinely curious about his experiences. A little known fact is that Marcel Jr. had his own UFO sighting while serving in Iraq. He told us about it in an interview in Roswell in 2010.
When I was stationed in Iraq, we did a lot of flying in Black Hawk helicopters. And one evening, we were flying back from north of Tikrit back to Balad, where our home field was. And the helicopters did not have any visible lights on them that you could see with the naked eye. It took night vision goggles to see this, because you wanted to keep your presence hid, secret as possible from the bad guys on the ground who might shoot you down. So anyway, no running lights, and as we were flying back to Balad, I saw this light kind of going across the field there, heading up towards Turkey. It's going at a fairly rapid pace there, but it's white light, a visible light. So we knew it wasn't an aircraft should not have been any civilian aircraft out there. There's a no-fly zone. And beside that, they would not be running with visible lights. But this was a visible light. So, the people in the helicopter saw this. We all saw it. Don't know what it was. But it was a light that should not have been there.
Another great story that is not well known is a story Marcel Jr. tells about Bill Brazel, the brother of the rancher who originally found the debris in Roswell.
He had a piece of the debris. He'd gone out on his horse the next day and actually picked some of it up. I guess he put it back in the saddlebag and just forgot about it. But years later, or sometime later, I'm not sure what the time frame is here, but he was with his friends in Corona, New Mexico at a bar there. And they started talking about this. And Bill says, I have a piece of it. Just among friends, like who's there to know about this? But he said not long after that, maybe a few days to a week later, some people came knocking on the ranch door and said, we understand you have some Air Force property and we intend to get it. So he surrendered it.
Wow, incredible.
So here it comes from the horse's mouth there that this is not a mundane object. They would not be coming back after a piece of aluminum foil from a radar target. But if it's from a spaceship, they would.
In our interview in 2010, he also told us how the realization that we are not alone in the universe changed his beliefs.
My life has changed, There's really a game changer when I realized that this was probably a spaceship from outer space. And people say, well, did it affect your religion? I said, no, it didn't. It increased my faith in God because it meant his creativity was not just limited to us, but to all out space.
Jesse was a great man. He was a friendly, honest, credible person who loved his country, and he loved serving his country. He's going to be sorely missed.
Well, it's definitely sad hearing about Jesse, and I feel lucky to have spent time with him recently at the last Roswell UFO Festival, and actually got to go out to the crash site with him. And I was just blown away by what a genuinely nice person Jesse was, and by how up-to-date he was on a lot of current events, and specifically about space exploration and a lot of the privatization of space. And I got to geek out with him about space and all the, SpaceX and all these various projects. I was surprised and not expecting him to be up on that, but he was very excited about that. And so we got to talk about space a little bit, and that's a really special memory for me.
Yeah, he was a great guy, and it's too bad. And he died with a UFO book by his side, which is
it's a great way to go.
cool.
I think a lot of UFO researchers hope they go that way. Yeah. Well, we'll miss you, Jesse. Well, that's all for this episode of Spacing Out. Be sure to visit openminds.tv for all the latest news. And if you're a podcast listener, go to openminds.tv/radio and check out Open Minds UFO Radio.
Make sure to click on the like button if you enjoyed today's show, and remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you know when we post new content. Thanks again for joining us today. I'm Maureen Ellsbury.
And I'm Jason McClellan. We will see you in the future.
If you have a UFO sighting or something you would like to report to Open Minds, you can go to our website at openminds.tv and click the contact button to send us your request. Or you can email us at contact@openminds.tv. You can also call us at 1-877-UFO-0110. That's 1-877-836-0110.